the defense seemed just remarkable. I couldn't understand if the defense attorney was trying to make the case initially that this was a good parent, a helicopter parent, going by Jennifer Crumbley's description, but then towards closing arguments, she started talking about how, you know, an imperfect parent, how talking about her own children in making the case and her own parenting, the attorney speaking about herself and making the case for, look, you can be a not so great parent, but not guilty of your child's mass shooting. What do you take will impact the jury? And of course, we're about to find out what the verdict is. But from where you stand, what do you think those jurors were weighing most strongly?
I think you're absolutely correct. How the defense strategy shifted just somewhat at the end of the trial. I think the jurors are going to pay attention to whether
there you are, Kirk. Do you mind repeating that, because we lost your audio for a second?
All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable
we are about to hear the verdict. Actually, this is again a historic moment. It has never happened. We are about to hear what this jury has decided. We're following other breaking news, but we're right now going into a CBS News special report with the results of this case.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm Robert Costa in Washington. We are coming on the air with breaking news from Pontiac, Michigan, where a verdict has been reached in a groundbreaking case. Jennifer Crumbley is charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter after her teen son Ethan killed 4 of his high school classmates in November 2021. Ethan Crumbley was sentenced last year to life in prison without parole for their deaths. This is the first time in the United States a parent has been charged in a mass school shooting committed by their child. Each of the charges against Jennifer Crumbley carry a maximum penalty of 15 years. The verdict is about to be read. Let's listen in.
Judge, do you want us to stay standing here?
It's up to you. It's up to you. I really want the audience to stay seated after when the verdict's read, after that. And after that.
It doesn't matter.
She can stand if she wants.
Okay. Do you want us to? We're going to say this because the jury's not all right for the jury.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've been informed that you have a verdict. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Are you the correct person?
I am.
Could you please read your verdict?
Individually?
Sure.
Okay. On count 1 of involuntary manslaughter as to Madison Baldwin, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter. On count 2 of involuntary manslaughter in regards to Tate Muir, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter. On count 3, as to involuntary manslaughter regarding Hannah St. Juliana, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter. And in count 4 of involuntary manslaughter against Justin Schilling, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
Thank you, Paul. You can be seated. And I'm going to listen to this whole hearing.
Juror in seat number 1, was that and is that your verdict?
It is.
Juror in seat number 2, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror in seat number 3, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror in seat number 5, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror in seat number 6, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror in seat number 7, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror in seat number 8, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror in seat number 11, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror in seat number 12, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror in seat number 13, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror in seat number 14, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror in seat number 16, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We all know that this is one of the hardest things you've ever done. I'm going to ask you to return to the jury room. The 2 remaining alternates are also going to join you, and I'll be with you in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All rise for the jury.
All right, you may be seated. Time is revoked, and I'm considering.
Elaine Quijano has been following the trial and is in Pontiac, Michigan for us at CBS News. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson will join us in a moment. But let's begin with you, Elaine. What's your reporter's assessment of this verdict across the board?
Well, it took these jurors, 6 men and 6 women, about 11 hours over the course of the past day and a half to reach this landmark decision, guilty verdicts on all 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Now, in its closing, the defense had argued that Jennifer Crumbley was an imperfect parent, that the choices she made did not necessarily perhaps line up with others' views on parenting, but the defense had tried to say that those choices did not amount to criminal behavior under involuntary manslaughter charges. The prosecution, however, sought to portray a very different picture of Jennifer Crumbley, saying that she was an inattentive mother. They said it was both what she did in buying the gun along with her husband, which her son then used in the shooting, and what she did not do, not getting her son help, they said, for his declining mental health, not telling school officials that he did in fact have a gun, and not taking him home in the hours just before the shooting. She had been called to the school along with her husband to meet with school officials about some disturbing drawings that her son had made. So now the jury has come back with this landmark decision. Sentencing for Jennifer Crumbley will come at a future date. And then, Bob, Crumbley's husband, James Crumbley, whose name came up over and over during the course of this trial, he is set to go on trial himself, also facing involuntary manslaughter charges next month.
Elaine, thank you. Stay with us. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson is also with us. Jessica, what does this mean for those future cases?
Well, I think Elaine, in her excellent reporting, has said it exactly right. This is a landmark case. This is the first case where we're asking whether or not criminal liability for a mass shooting extends not just from the child who perpetrates that shooting, but also to the children. In this case, the jury answered that in the affirmative. And I think the question moving forward is, will there be, sadly, we know this won't be the last mass shooting in a school. Will there be other prosecutors who will try the same tact? Now, let's remember, there were very bad facts here against Jennifer Crumbley. But if a similar situation occurs, will prosecutors now say, you know what, this is another route for us to find criminal liability?
What do you believe weighed most heavily on the jurors in this case?
So I think it was a combination of listening to the prosecution say she bought him the gun. The gun was not properly stored. She went to the school that day. She saw the drawing that was troubling enough for the school to say to the parents, come in, and she knew of her son's mental health issues. I also think, and Elaine can report on this, obviously, based on what she saw in the courtroom, but I think what weighed in the jury's mind is that when she was on the stand, she said, I would not have done anything differently. And I think the jurors in their mind were saying, you know what, you had a duty, you breached duty by acting and failing to act, and that was at least one cause of what happened here. You could have stopped it.
Jessica Levinson and Elaine Quijano, thank you. Our coverage will continue on CBS News Streaming, your local news, and tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Robert Costa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lilia Luciano. We continue following this breaking news. A new precedent has been set. Jennifer Crumbley has been found guilty of involuntary manslaughter for all 4 charges for all the 4 children her son, Ethan Crumbley, killed at Oxford High School in Michigan back in 2021. She's the first parent in the United States to be charged and convicted in this country for a mass shooting that was committed by their child. Her husband, James, is expected to also face trial starting in March. Some of what the prosecutors argue was that Crumbley was, quote, grossly negligent in not just allowing her child to have a gun, but let's remind you that the parents of Ethan Crumbley gifted him the gun 4 days before the shooting. This was an early Christmas present, according to the evidence that was presented during the trial. The prosecution also presented evidence of signs that the child had given, basically begging for mental health treatment, which the parents had ignored. Kirk Burkhalter joins us now. He's a professor at New York Law School and the director of the school's 21st Century Policing Project. Kirk, this is surprising, I'm sure, to many when you hear the headline of a parent being charged for the crime of the child. But when you dive into the details and you know that, just as Elaine was reporting, the morning of the shooting, the parents were brought into school and shown a drawing that had a drawing of a gun that looked exactly like the one they had given the child as a present, a body full of bullet holes lying on a pool of blood, which the mother said in trial she thought it was a Batman cape, and a series of cries for help, very direct. Is this surprising to you that not only did she not disclose to the school that he had access to a gun, but decided not to take him away from school? I mean, does this sound like guilt enough for being convicted now in these 4 charges of involuntary manslaughter?
I'm actually not surprised, given the standard. If you think about the standard, the criminal negligence standard, it is whether a reasonable person under these circumstances could have foreseen the harm. And when you take the totality of the circumstances here, for purchasing the gun for the shooter and the drawings and the history of mental health, everything else, this kid was a guided missile, and that guided missile was aimed at this school. And likewise, I'm somewhat surprised that it has taken this long for a prosecutor to bring charges in this nature against a parent. Keep in mind, we've seen charges against parents previously, but it's usually about the child, some type of child neglect charges.
Right.
Never so much against the parent for the harm the child created against the victims.
For the actual crime, for the actual shooting. I want to bring in CBS News correspondent Elaine Quijano, who is outside the courthouse. Elaine, I remember when the verdict on Casey Anthony came out, I was at that court, and there was shock and there was screaming. Nobody expected that. What's the reaction right now outside this Pontiac, Michigan court?
Right. So our colleague Kyla Peoples is inside the courtroom and just moments ago texted me about the scene inside where the prosecutor, in the immediate moments after the verdicts were read, hugged the father of one of the victims, Justin Schilling. There's a picture here where you see Karen McDonald, the Oakland County prosecutor who prosecuted this case, embracing him. And as you can imagine, for these family members, this ordeal has been something that has been unbearable, essentially. They have watched now and seen the evidence of that day, November 30th, 2021, when their loved ones were killed, and hoping to see someone held accountable. Now, with this guilty verdict, there is also another trial, as you know. James Crumbley is set to face trial in March. We're also hearing from Kyla. We want to let you know April 9th, we're hearing now, is the sentencing date for Jennifer Crumbley. So still a series of events here for the family members who have already been through so much.
And you have been covering this, Elaine. When you were sitting here and I was standing there, we were texting about the defense. It was so bizarre. Do you think that the strategy of the defense shifting, making it about herself, might have played into this? Or is it the facts were laid out, and as Kirk was talking about, that bar is not so high because it's involuntary manslaughter. It's not like she's being charged for murder.
Yeah. It's a good question because it's hard to know, obviously, what ultimately was most persuasive to the jurors. But you're right. The tactic, especially in the closing argument of the defense attorney, was one we haven't necessarily seen before, where she was essentially comparing her own style of parenting to Jennifer Crumbley's, and essentially making the argument that Jennifer Crumbley, like many parents, including myself, the defense attorney argued, was not a perfect parent, that she made choices some might see as questionable. But her defense strategy there seemed to be to essentially appeal to the parents who were sitting in that jury box, saying, parents, at one point, this could be dangerous for a parent to be held accountable, criminally accountable for the actions of their child. Her argument, as you know, was that the choices Jennifer Crumbley made did not amount to criminal behavior under the involuntary manslaughter charges. However, the prosecution presented quite a bit of evidence essentially attempting to refute that. They attempted to refute the idea that she was attentive. They said that there were calls for mental health, that the shooter himself was trying to reach out, as he had texted a friend, as he had written in a journal. The prosecution presented some of that, and the jury ultimately sided with the prosecution's view that Jennifer Crumbley was in fact criminally responsible. And so the legal precedent here, Lilia, as you know from having covered this case yourself, is unlike anything we've ever seen before. And now it very much sends a message, as you were just discussing a moment ago with the analyst, to all parents about how it is that their actions might be viewed in the wake of violence that might be committed by their children. So certainly some implications that will ripple far beyond Michigan with this case.
And look, this is what first comes to mind is there have been so many efforts to reduce access to guns, to weapons in different states at the federal level. And a lot of people who advocate for that say there needs to be another tool if we can't get anything passed in Congress. I want to bring in Kirk. Kirk, what Elaine was just talking about the implications. How far-reaching do you think this decision is, this verdict right now? Or do you think this is kind of an isolated case where the evidence was way too overwhelming?
Oh, no, I don't think it's isolated at all, because unfortunately, we've seen this before, perhaps not to this degree, but certainly we've seen where someone who is underage, perhaps under the age of 18, was able to get hold of a firearm with the help of a parent, and the parent ignored those signs, and that person went out and created some harm. The only thing we just certainly haven't seen is the prosecution of the parents. And I think, the American public, prosecutors, government, all of us are a little bit fed up with people walking into schools and killing our children. And I think that the time is ripe for accountability to be extended. And I don't mean that as a commentary. I just mean that I believe that for the public, the time is right for accountability to be extended. So I don't think this is a one-off. I think this is something we could certainly see again.
I wonder, and Elaine, you've been covering this, of course, when we cover a story, you see the comments on social media. Politically speaking, is this case perhaps less unpopular, let's say, or less divisive than gun policy in general? I mean, does it seem to be like people are not aligning along political lines as it often happens when it comes to access to guns?
The prosecutor, in their opening statements, sort of tangentially referenced, during the opening statements, I was in the courtroom for this, the prosecutor said directly, this is not about taking away people's guns. He said this very directly to the jurors. He said this was about the choices that were made where a parent essentially failed to perform their legal duty here in Michigan to protect others from their child. And so it was an interesting statement to hear from the very outset, before any evidence had been presented. And it speaks to the level of high sort of emotion surrounding this issue of gun safety and the debate that we have seen in this country. And so yet what we saw presented over the duration of this trial was a great deal of focus on how the gun in this case was secured, and that is very likely to be a framework, a template, legal analysts have told me, moving forward in future cases.
I see. Well, Elaine Quijano, Kirk Burkhalter, don't go anywhere. Neither Nobody goes anywhere. This conversation, we are going to continue it, and we're going to continue covering this historic moment. The verdict is in. A parent has been convicted for the mass shooting carried out by their child. We are going to take a very quick break, but more on the verdict is ahead. You are streaming CBS News. Stay with us.
Well, let me start with this.
This really happened.
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
You want me to just
What's
keep
wrong
going?
with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
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 It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good? Mm-hmm. Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. Yeah, it's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discovery, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
Human remains found this week.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
A gripping true crime original, 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
How can we become our best selves? That may be more about character than talent.
The ultimate mark of your potential is how far you've climbed, not how high you've gone.
Realizing your true potential with Adam Grant as we go person to person.
CBS News, 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
CBS News. Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, Sunday on CBS.
CBS Morning.
Your morning routine just got better.
I love that.
CBS Mornings.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
Here in Tel Aviv, the second siren about 10 minutes. This Humvee.
Hey there, everyone. As promised, we are back following this breaking news. Jennifer Crumbley has been found guilty of 4 charges of involuntary manslaughter for the 2021 Oxford High School shooting carried out by her son, Ethan. She is the first parent in the United States to be convicted for a mass shooting committed by their child. Prosecutors argued Crumbley was, quote, grossly negligent in allowing her son to have a gun. And beyond that, along with her husband, with gifting him said gun just 4 days before the shooting happened. And also for failing to get him proper mental health treatment. But the defense argued she was not to blame for the shooting and that her conviction would set a dangerous precedent. Her son, Ethan Crumbley, was sentenced to life in prison last December without parole. He killed 4 students Pens and wounded several others at Oxford High School, as I mentioned, in 2021. For more details on this, I want to bring in CBS News correspondent Elaine Quijano, who is outside that courthouse in Pontiac, Michigan. Elaine, let's talk about what was expected when you came in. We always, covering these stories, you start hearing people's theories. It has been such an important case, really, with these far-reaching repercussions. And how surprised are people? Are they not at all?
You know, it's interesting because going into this, we had never seen, as you were mentioning, a case quite like this one before. And so in speaking with legal analysts, they really weren't sure themselves what to expect. What they told me was that it was essentially a really novel approach to the law to go ahead and charge the parents, in this case the mother, Jennifer Crumbley, in connection with the shooting at Oxford High School. And what the prosecutor said at the outset to the jury was that Jennifer Crumbley may not have pulled the trigger, but he told them he felt she was absolutely responsible, and then proceeded to detail throughout the course of the case the many times he felt she made choices that made her responsible. Things like getting her son the gun. She, along with her husband, got that gun, which was used during the shooting, as a gift 4 days before the shooting itself. The prosecutor also pointed to the fact that the parents, and Jennifer Crumbley in particular, seemed to have ignored red flags, warning signs that her son's mental health was declining. And crucially, in the hours before the shooting, when she was called to the school along with her husband because of some disturbing drawings that her son had made, she did not choose to bring her son home. Prosecutors argued all of that were essentially the reasons why they felt the jury needed to move forward and convict and find Jennifer Crumbley guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
Right, and one of the things that stood out to people, too, is that she didn't tell the school that he had a gun which looked exactly like that very talented drawing that he made in that horrible drawing at the school. The thing that was taken from him, which they called the parents for, we are concerned. There are signs of, I mean, it couldn't get more clear that this child needs help. But at the same time, the school didn't check his backpack. The school allowed the parents to leave him in class. I want to bring in Jessica Levinson. She is a CBS News contributor and a professor of Loyola Law School in California. And Jessica, I'm just curious because a lot of people have commented on the videos that I have placed on this case online and said, what about the school? Is the school going to be held accountable too? We know the father will because his trial starts in a month, but what's that bar like when it comes to the school itself?
So I think the answer is no, that it doesn't look like there are any charges that will be brought against the school. I mean, Elaine has had excellent reporting on this really difficult and landmark trial the whole time. And as you both talked about, this is the first time that we have said, does criminal liability for a mass shooting extend out not just from the child or the minor who actually perpetrated the crime, but to the parents. And we now know, of course, that Jennifer Crumbley, that the jury has answered that question in the affirmative with respect to her. There's now a question with respect to her husband. As you point out, I think her defense was not it, right? Look at the school, look at my husband, look at my son. All of those people took actions as well or failed to take actions in the case of the school, calling the parents in, but then not saying, no, he must go home and not taking additional steps. So I think the question in my mind is, does this have repercussions for other cases? Because unfortunately, what we all know is there will be other cases that we talk about. And the answer is maybe this is a new route for prosecutors if they have facts that look akin to these facts.
And Elaine, I want to get back into those facts because not everybody has been following this case as attentively. And anybody seeing this as a headline is going to think, oh, wow, so if I miss a sign, I'm going to go to prison. I mean, let's talk about the facts. What is remarkable about this case? How was this jury able to convict and find this parent guilty? What stands out?
Yeah, well, so one thing that the prosecution focused on quite closely is how the guns in the house were secured or not secured. And for that, it was interesting to hear the defense essentially make the argument that it was not Jennifer Crumbley's responsibility to handle the weapons, that even though she was seen on social media video going to the shooting range with her son, that in fact, the defense argued, it was her husband, James Crumbley, who knew about guns. He was the gun enthusiast, the defense argued. He was the one who was most comfortable in handling the weapons. He was the one who essentially purchased the weapon, even though it was from both of them. And so the defense tried to say that because of that, Jennifer Crumbley should not be held responsible for that kind of access. That was not her area of responsibility, the defense argued. The prosecution, however, sought to counter that by saying that she was aware and at one point went through a litany of responsibilities. It was a very sort of rapid question and answer where the prosecution said, you don't trust your husband with this. You didn't trust your husband with that. And at the end of that, the prosecutor said, and yet you trusted him with a deadly weapon and securing a deadly weapon. And so that is a moment that stood out because if you are a juror hearing that, we obviously haven't heard from the jurors, likely are not going to hear from the jurors at this point. But that was a moment that certainly stood out, just looking objectively at the facts as they tried to weigh who was responsible for securing that weapon. That seemed to be a moment that did stand out.
You know, in being there and in listening to the case that was being brought by really both sides, it almost, I mean, for me personally, it got to the point where you can't help but feel empathy for the child who is screaming for help, who is journaling about what he wants to do, who says, my parents are not getting me the therapy that I need. And also, they went through so many details about the character of this mother, somebody who was not just that she was having an affair, but looking for other people to involve in that, who was too busy with her horses, with other hobbies. Jessica, when now we look at the fact that she has been convicted, that maybe there was all of this negligence or lack of paying attention to the signs, what can we deduct will happen with the father? Oh, we're going to actually go to the court where one of the fathers of the victims is giving a statement. Let's listen.
With your child, it is your choice to have a child, and you cannot choose to not take care of your child. You cannot choose to not nurture your child. You cannot choose to take your own interest over your child, especially when it comes to mental health and addressing concerns, problem. I mean, everything about that was disturbing. There's a lot of stuff that could have easily thwarted this whole thing. It could have been stopped very easily.
What would you see their verdict?
I don't really have can't pinpoint any thoughts, but definitely. It's a relief to have it behind us and be able to shift focus to the next one. I mean, so I would definitely shift focus to the next one. I mean, so I would definitely say that it was just a good load off your chest.
Mr. Chairman, what was it like to be sitting through the legal testimony and the fact that you'll have to do this again in March?
Well, it's okay. I'm fully committed to seeing it through every step of the way on every trial that comes through about this.
And school officials, what is your hope that this message sends to school officials here in Michigan and across the country?
Well, on certain situations, everybody is responsible to exercise their diligence and comb through everything. And I feel strongly that it's important to make sure that we're doing our jobs. And I know that as a parent, or I know that there's always something in your mind that you have to do when you get out of work, and there's stuff to take you focus off of what your job is. But it's just so important, and you can't stress it enough, that you have to take your time and look at every possibility and look at every angle and just explore the situation in its entirety. And there's a lot of blatant facts there that could have been addressed differently, and it's just important to be diligent with your jobs, whatever they may be. And everybody has their own important part of society, and just make sure you hold on to that importance and know what it's for.
What would you say to Jennifer Crumbley right now, if you could say anything to her?
We have been listening to the statements of Craig Schilling. He is the father of 17-year-old Justin Schilling, who was killed at Oxford High. He's one of the parents who had given victim impact statements throughout the time of the trial of Ethan Crumbley, but also now we're hearing now that the mother of Ethan Crumbley is being held accountable, convicted in all 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter for the deaths of not just Justin, but 3 of his peers. I want to bring in Jessica Levinson. Jessica, we were just talking about, the details of this case, and this is the first parent, but both parents are being charged. What does this guilty verdict do to the case of the husband who actually went with Ethan to purchase the gun? And does this have a significant impact in the outcome of that case?
So I think we could view it actually one of 2 ways. On the one hand, we can say we found the parent who we think was most responsible. We found the parent who had the duty, breached the duty, and was at least one cause. On the other hand, I think what we could say is we now have a situation where, based on what Ethan did, based on all the warning signs to both his parents, based on how both his parents helped him access the gun, failed to store it, were at the school, saw that drawing, that this now shows that criminal culpability is appropriate for him as well. I don't know which way that will break, but I frankly think you could argue it out either way in terms of whether or not this is bad for his father. I tend to think the fact that the jury was willing to say, yes, we're going to extend that criminal liability out, essentially one concentric circle, that's not good for him.
I see. And one of the questions that I had, just listening to the case coming from the defense and the statements that were made by the defense attorney, especially during closing arguments, I kept wondering, could this be grounds? The fact that the statements made were sometimes so outrageous and disconnected to the actual case and painted Crumbley in such a negative picture just to make the case that she's not a perfect parent, but she's also not guilty. Do you think that's grounds for perhaps an appeal, and the fact that this case is just, it has no precedent?
So I think that we should be careful about attorneys arguing vigorously and sometimes using hyperbole. And there's been a lot of different cases that you and I have talked about. And typically speaking, there can only be grounds for an appeal if, while an attorney is arguing, then you hear an objection and you hear the judge saying something like, I'm sorry, members of the jury, strike that, don't consider that. But attorneys are given broad leeway to try and cast their story in the best way possible for their client, whether or not you're a prosecutor and your client's the people, or a defense attorney and you have an individual client. So I'm not sure that I'm seeing grounds for an appeal there. Again, this is a novel application of involuntary manslaughter and gross negligence, but I think the defense trying to cast this in the best way possible for them, and or the prosecution doing the same, I don't think that's going to be grounds for a successful appeal.
Well, Jessica Levinson, Elaine Quijano, thank you so much. We will continue to cover the developments in this unprecedented, truly historic